All right, welcome to the Detroit Lions News podcast. I'm your host, Joe Chapp. We're talking about the Detroit Lions versus the LA Rams because it just ended. Usually we don't have ones this late. We do go after the game, we do go live a lot. So, well, most of the time. Detroit Lions lose 41-34 to the LA Rams. And, just before we get into the synopsis, whatever, all the opinions and article, everything, this game was really evenly played. When you look at the statistics of this game, it's just a couple more yards, a couple more plays. That's all it is. When you look at first downs, third downs, they were 2 for 9. You were 5 for 14. So you had 14 third downs. They had 9. Matthew Stafford, 368 passing yards. Jared Goff, 338 passing yards. Jahmyr Gibbs to 38 rushing yards. Kyron Williams, 78 rushing yards. These are the little things that lost the game today. Whether you like to admit it or not, the Detroit Lions, realistically played a pretty good game. They played an offensive slugfest, and anybody with a pulse knew that coming into this game, it would have to be an offensive shootout. You weren't going to win a defensive slugfest, or whatever the case might be. And your defense not healthy enough to win one of those defensive games. And for the most part, the Lions offense came to play in every step of the imagination. Their yards per rush was not good. Obviously, the LA Rams was better. They ran for 5.5 yards per rush. Detroit ran for 3.5. So again, those 2 yards between the two teams was a huge factor, and it was a 6-point. It's still a touchdown game. So there's a lot to say about this game. But coming into this game, I thought a lot of people were just either they were too scared to admit what was going to happen, or they were just, making up stuff. This game was always going to be a puncher's chance. I mean, it was always going to be a puncher's chance, no matter how you sliced it. The Lions came out and they punched them with their best punch, and they just couldn't land that fatal blow. But the Rams did, and I go back to that third quarter where you had 5 yards in that third quarter, and the Rams scored 17 points, and that's exactly where the game was won and lost. You could not have a quarter like you had in that game, where you had 5 yards in the third quarter. It just doesn't happen that way. But it's easy to see why 2 teams won and lost. This is very easy. It's not something that where the Lions, played a good game and they lost. It's just not, even with the whole debacle. We'll get into this debacle where I don't know what I got some things to say about the NFL for sure. They're not just this, but with the whole league overall. And then but you look at this game, there was not much different than what has happened in the past. And I'll start with that. I've said for the past couple weeks, no matter how you slice it, the Lions are inconsistently consistent. And I was talking to, my podcast partner from Regular Podcast, or Better Wings Podcast. And I was talking to her and I was like, it seemed like the Lions when I was talking about the Red Wings. And the reality of the situation is, like, I watch this team. I'll watch the All 22 on a daily, frequent basis. And when I watch this team, there was a glaring play that really showed me what this team is, and it's showed throughout the entire season. Hutchinson has a dead to center sack on Matthew Stafford. Dead rights. He has Stafford dead to rights, and he could not get the sack. They are one of the teams that leads that. They're in the top of pressures in the NFL. They're top 10. They're top 10 in sacks too, but they have had an enormous ability, for whatever the reason, where they have a chance to make a game-altering play, a game-changing play, and what they did last year, they made all the game-changing plays. This year, they're not making the game-changing plays. And it's pretty incredible that if they win out from here, they'll win 11 games, and they'll still have a chance to miss the playoffs. So they're going to need help. They're going to need help from the Bears to lose. They're going to need help from the Packers. And Packers just, if you read all the reports, they might have lost Micah Parsons. So it's not an easy road for the Detroit Lions by any stretch of imagination, especially with Micah Parsons going down. It really makes life much more difficult, especially when you think about the Packers needed to sweep the Bears. And hopefully they can next Saturday. But the reality of the situation is without Micah Parsons, what is the Green Bay Packers? That's what we don't know. But it goes along the lines with what I was about to say about Detroit Lions. I mean, the Micah Parsons injury sucks for the Packers. The Tucker Kraft injury for the Packers sucks for the Packers. And I feel like watching today's game and realizing two things can be said. And it's not Brad Holmes' fault. It's not his fault for the roster being, not as deep or whatever in that area. You lose Brian Branch. You lose Kirby Joseph. You lose Terrion Arnold. I don't care what you think of Terrion Arnold. I don't care what you think about Terrion Arnold. He's a starting quarterback in the NFL. And you're seeing what Amik Robertson's doing. And I posted a statistic out there. What happened last week, and people were all upset. They were like, well, Amik Robertson isn't supposed to be. Yes, I know. I know he's not supposed to be starting. I know he's not supposed to be outside the slot. But he still gives up the most yards on the Lions by a wide margin. And it just feels like, you lose Kirby Joseph, you lose Brian Branch, and today it was watching today's game, watching how much the run game defense suffered. I know Kyron Williams is good. I got him on my fantasy team. But Kyron Williams and Blake Corum ran for 5.5 yards per carry. That's the most out of any team against the Detroit Lions. And you could tell at times the loss of Brian Branch proved huge. It just did. Last year I was one of those guys, and I don't want to go to that point, but we're at the point right now where the Detroit Lions cannot afford any more injuries. They just cannot afford any more injuries. Like, they're at a point right now, like I said last year, where they're at a point where too many injuries at one position, too many injuries on one side of the ball to great players. We're now Sam Laporta, Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph. Those are three impactful, important players for this roster. And I don't care what you dullards say. Some of these people that will get in the comments, they'll say, oh my gosh, why isn't Brad Holmes going and getting these guys? Guys, I would hate to tell you this, but when the Packers lose Micah Parsons, they will see an indeed drop in talent. When Tucker Kraft goes down with an injury, there's a drop in talent. Devontae Adams potentially tearing his hamstring off the bone, because that's what it looked like on TV. There's going to be a drop in talent, okay? Patrick Mahomes getting hurt today from going to Gardner Minshew. There's a huge drop off there. You usually do not have where you go from all pro to good player. It just doesn't happen that way. So in today's game, I felt like the loss of Brian Branch, it was huge. It was huge, especially in the run game, because the LA Rams ran for 70. They ran for 159 yards. Detroit ran for 70. They had 5.5 rushing yards per rush, which is incredible. Detroit had 3.5. And when we came in today's game, I told you guys, look at these defenses. Total defense, 13th and 15th. They're on paper, these two teams were identically similar. LA Rams are better in the red zone, but you look at it like, okay, Detroit, they would have to hold their own. And when you saw what you saw from their defense, where Brian Branch goes down, and yet last week, and you see what happens this week against a good team. I mean, comes a point where every team, there's too much loss to go around. There just is. It's just the reality. And you could see it on the offense a little bit. Like you could imagine what the offense would look like with a healthy Sam Laporta. You would imagine what the offense would look like with a Kirby Joseph in there. Um, just those players missing, like it's not easy. And the Lions are in a point right now where they got to win out and they got to have help. And we'll see if they get the help that they need. But this game pretty much went the way I expected. There's very realistic routes to get to the playoffs for the Detroit Lions. But they need to find along the way, they need to find defensive philosophy and identity moving forward without Brian Branch, perhaps without Kirby Joseph. If they get Kirby Joseph back, that'd be great. But we'll see. So that's what it is. Let's see. Let's hear Coach Campbell. Let's hear Coach Campbell's view on today's game. I was playing a little bit throughout the thing. Let me put him on here. This is from Detroit Lions .com from their Twitter profile. Let me get it up right here. All right, but
it should burn at you. You know, it should eat you up, and do not go numb to the losing. All right, staff and I, we're going to come in. We're going to watch this thing together tomorrow. All of us in all three phases. Watch everything top down. The players, ourselves. You know, and make those corrections and then move on. And it's simple as going back to work, and we got to get better with Pittsburgh coming into town. We got to play better. And now we know, you know, now you have firsthand knowledge of what, you know, what probably the top of the NFC looks like right now. That's them, you know. And so now you know what it looks like, you know what it is, and we're not there right now. Doesn't mean we can't be, but now we know what it looks like.
So you heard Coach Campbell right there talk about the top of the NFC and what it looks like. And exactly what he just said is exactly the way I feel about this whole situation. You know, you look at the Rams and you look at the Detroit Lions, and there's talent all across the board with Detroit and LA. And that offensive first half where it was blow for blow, just each team throwing haymakers. And then, you know, you have one bad quarter and the defense doesn't make a stop. The offense gets only 5 yards for the whole third quarter. That's the difference in the game. And throughout the Lions season, you know, they've had chances and chances and chances and chances and chances. And even against Green Bay, I thought they played good against Green Bay. They played really good. They just could not convert on their chances. And again, you see it with the LA Rams. They had chances to convert. They just didn't convert. That's just what it comes down to. It comes down to converting your chances and how do you make sure that the chances that you don't convert come back to haunt you. For example, that throw to Jamison Williams where he had the catch, it was a little little bit outran it. It hit his helmet. He could have still caught it. He didn't. Ends up with a short field, and the Rams get a touchdown. That's how this season has gone for the Detroit Lions. It's been, you know, one play here, one play there. You're the benefactor of getting hit with that play. So it just sucks. It sucks for that standpoint. But, you know, Dan Campbell said on the defense, he said, we're better than that. I know we're better than that, but we're better than 41 points. So there you go. I think it's a really tough pill to swallow for a lot of people. It's a really big pill to swallow for what the Detroit Lions are coming into. And, you know, I always wondered what the impact of Brian Branch missing the game would be because he's so impactful in the run game, in the pass game, rushing the quarterback, blitzing. He's a 5-tool player, and when you miss one of those guys, it's very tough, man. It's a very tough point to come back from. So that is what it is. Now let's get to some comments. There's some comments that we'll get to right now. James says it was a fairly good game today. Most of us expected this loss. To be honest, we seem to be trying to make up for not having Laporta. Play calling didn't seem to show up in the third, but we fixed it in the fourth. Sadly, we can't do that in the slugfest. And you know what James said is exactly the truth. Like you against a team like the Minnesota Vikings or the New York Giants, perhaps you can get away with a bad third quarter, right? Against a team like the LA Rams or the Seattle Seahawks or the 49ers or the Packers or even the Bears or the Eagles, okay? You will not get away with having a bad quarter. You just won't. And when your offense gets 5 yards and you allow 17 points, I don't care how good you are. You saw this when the Commanders came to Detroit in the divisional round. You have a bad couple plays, it ends up haunting you. And usually you get to this point in the year and it's got to be you got to be a well-earthed machine. And unfortunately for Detroit, the last 2 years, when you're talking about this team, they've really struggled to put their best foot forward. That's what you're seeing. So, unfortunately for Detroit, they lose today. But like James said, you can't have a bad third quarter. And what James also said about Laporta being injured, it's a very interesting point. And I think this can go with the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball. Missing Sam Laporta, missing Brian Branch through this one game, you saw a difference in the defense today without Brian Branch. We haven't had Kirby Joseph for a majority of the year. It's looked a little stale at times because you're not getting those picks because Kirby Joseph is a really good pick artist. But, man, Brian Branch was so critical in run defense. And today you give up 5.5 yards per carry, per rush. That sucks. That sucks. It really just it eats at you. It does. It eats at you. All right, and then BJ Smith says all these defenses that rely on their front four seem tailor-made for Monty's run style, and we haven't leaned on him enough when he gives a slowdown. Yeah, I felt like this was a little bit. This was one of the things that I think Dan Campbell really screwed up on. I think Jahmyr Gibbs having 38 yards, and he was, he ran for 13 carries, 38 yards. Dave Montgomery had 7 carries and 32 yards and a touchdown. So, anybody who could disagree with BJ and his thoughts and his analysis on the situation, but the facts are the facts. 7 carries for Montgomery, 32 yards, 4.6 yards per rush. Jahmyr Gibbs, 13 carries, 38 yards, 2.9 yards per rush. So, BJ, great point. It's actually factually proven. And, this is something that Dan Campbell needs to go back to the drawing boards over. Really needs to go back to the drawing boards over. BJ, another one. In a game that would come down to 3 or 4 plays, the refs showed up. All the penalties that were called were opinion calls, and they only felt like calling one team. That's why the NFL has an officiating problem. You know what, BJ? This was my next thing I was going to talk about because I'll just say right here. I've never felt more disrespected by the product of the NFL. Never been more disrespected by the product of the NFL. When you watch hockey, their refs could be a little bit ticky-tacky, but they call calls. They make the right call. When I saw this play that happened with Parkinson, it's clear that he was down. It's clear that he perhaps may not have caught it. When you got my whole gist of the point is when you have fans from other cities, other, parts of the country that are upset about the call and making a big deal about the call, maybe you do have an officiating problem. And we saw it with the Baltimore Ravens last week where a touchdown wasn't called a touchdown. And the NFL has their reffing contract. The negotiations are starting up. I look. This is all I'll say. Detroit, the Lions could get the shaft. It's okay. It's okay. There's been plenty of times where the Lions have got the shaft, but for the goodness of the game and the way that there's so many betting markets where you can go to DraftKings, you can go to FanDuel, whatever you want to do, and you would want to make the product a lot more better, wouldn't you? I look at this product right now. It's horribly officiated. It's almost up there with the NBA. It hasn't reached the NBA level, but once it reaches the NBA level, then I'll have a real issue because I think the NBA has the most horrible officiating product ever. And I look at this NFL product and I go, it's not much better. It's really not much better. And they need to simplify things with the catch. They need to simplify things with the catch, penalties. Just make it easier on the refs. I think they have to know so much. They have to lean on so much. And I think having a guy in the sky could be a really good idea. But unfortunately, the NFL is not really, they're the only league without full-time referee employees. Isn't that just a joke? Like, I can't sit here and say the NFL is doing a good job at really making their product better because the officiating is an issue. League-wide, it's an issue. All you have to do is turn on a game and see some crappy call. And I know people in Detroit think it's just us or whatever the case may be, but turn on the TV, Minnesota, Dallas. There will be a crappy call in that game. Tomorrow, Miami, Pittsburgh, there will be a crappy call in that game because that's what the NFL has done. They've created the product where the refs really don't know what they're talking about sometimes. They actually, there's times where they don't think they know anything. And it's actually just it's baffling to me that a product that is just as good or is worth as much money as the NFL is worth, and they cannot get this right. They just cannot get it right. And the Parkinson catch, not catch, catch, not a catch, down at the one, not down at the one. Look, there's plenty of ways you can go about it. But the reality of the situation is, if I was an NFL owner, if I'm Sheila Ford Hamp, if I'm Stan Kroenke, if I'm, one of the owners that I have a say, I'm being more on the ref's ass than I've ever been in my entire life. You have a negotiation coming up and there's CBA for the refs. The NFL has to pony up. Let's make them full-time employees. I'm sick of this. If I was an owner, I'd be saying, I'm sick of this happening every game, every team. And then there's some games where it's worse than others. And it seems like Detroit has a little bit worse than others, but that is what it is. But the NFL has a lot of issues right now. And that leads me to my next issue. Because my next issue is really simple. It goes down with Detroit because Detroit has one of the teams with the most players on IR again. But we watched Micah Parsons today tear his ACL. We watched Patrick Mahomes today tear his ACL. We watched Devontae Adams in the Detroit Lions LA Rams game tear his hamstring off the effing bone. Okay. And I would be shocked if it's not tore off the bone because the way that he labored, I think it was tore off the bone. But I'm going to tell you this right now. The NFL better expand rosters real quick, because you're getting to a point where teams are just getting destroyed by injuries because of the schedule, because of the way that the schedule sets up. Like the Detroit Lions had a Monday game, they had a Sunday night game, to a Sunday game, to a Thursday game, to another Thursday game, they had 10 days off between last game and today's game. But that's a rough road, and it really puts a lot of onus on the players. So for me, I think that the NFL should really expand rosters. And today was a prime example of why the NFL should expand rosters. And everyone asks why, why doesn't Detroit have the depth that they should have? We can only have 53 people on the roster. The roster should at least be expanded to 62, 65. Like, you're getting to the point right now where you're eventually going to add an 18th game to the schedule. You got to expand the rosters, and I don't know what the NFL is waiting for, because when you look at Detroit, like they've lost Brian Branch, Sam Laporta, Kirby Joseph, but you look across the NFL, like there's players dropping all over the place, and it's ironically been the last couple years that what was healthy team at the end wins the Super Bowl. Not the most talented team wins the Super Bowl, the healthiest team. How do you go through the schedule and keep going? Like, that's just the way it goes. So the NFL has a lot of issues they need to really get rectified. So it is what it is. It's just the way it is. I'm very annoyed by the way this whole product is going about. All right, Dan Campbell. What do you say? Oh, that's Jared Goff. Where is Dan Campbell? Let's hear Jared Goff, what he's saying about having a resilient group.
We've got a resilient group.
No, it's gonna play automatically. All right, let's hear Jared Goff and his opinion on having a resilient group and seeing what they can do later.
Yeah, we've got a resilient group, man. We bounce back after things like this, and got a home game in front of our fans. Expect them to bring it for us and find a way to win that one and go to the next. And it'd be nothing better than entering the playoffs off a 3-game win streak, and that's got to be the goal. But again, in order to win 3, you got to win 1, and so we got to focus on that one.
So, that was Mr. Jared Goff, and they could be a resilient group all they want, but this is a tough road to go down. It's a really tough road to go down. You're gonna have to win 3 straight, and right now the Lions are 8-6. Get to 11-6, that'd be great. But the reality of the situation is this: the Bears game will not be easy, but you need help coming down the stretch. You need help to come down the stretch, and yes, it would be great to enter the playoffs with a 3-game winning streak. But the reality of the situation is, what do you do when you get to the postseason? That is the major question, in my opinion. And the way I look at this roster, man, I'm shocked that this roster hasn't, stayed healthy again. I'm shocked that the roster once again is hampered by injuries. But these are some of the things. But I just look at this team and I go, you really miss Sam Laporta. You really miss Brian Branch. And, you heard what Dan Campbell said. You saw what the top of the NFC looks like. And you had to play perfect to win that game. Play perfect to win the game. You had a bad third quarter and you lost. That's the way it's been the last 2 years with the injuries. Like, a lot of people, they could say, "Oh, injuries don't matter. Next man up, all that garbage." The reality of the situation is this: you can only go next man up so much. Like, next man up is a myth. It's really a myth. You lose guys like Hutchinson, like last year. You lose guys like Kirby Joseph, Laporta, Branch this year. McNeil last year. You can't lose that many good players. And if you listen to the Packer fans out there, if they lose Micah Parsons and they lose Tucker Kraft, those are 2 of the key players on their team. And I've read a couple at Packer fans that have said the Super Bowl dream died today when Micah Parsons went down. Because this is a league where stars win. Stars win. And I look at the LA Rams, they got the stars. They might not be the best team, but they got players that are healthy. They're probably the most healthy team out there. So it is what it is. It goes down. Like I said, it's a tough way to go about. But yes, the Lions are a resilient group. They don't lose 2 back to back. So now you're gonna have to win 3 straight. You're gonna have to win a game on Christmas. They're going to have to go and beat the Bears at the last week of the season. It's a tough road, man. But, I think Detroit can do it. It's just a matter of, do they get the help? And today, the Packers lost today. Did they lose today? Did the Packers lose today? Yes, they did. Yes, they did. 34-26. So, again, the Packers are going to go into next week. This is probably the best bet. The Packers are going to go into next week, and they're going to go with their hair on fire against the Bears. And you got to hope that the Packers lose another game going down a stretch. But you could potentially still win the division, potentially. But the Bears need to lose a game, and that's next week. So hopefully it's next week. Let's get to some more comments. Let's see. Orland says our secondary issues have been a huge part in every L this year. Absolutely. Absolutely. When you have the amount of injuries, when you have amount of deficiency of talent, I've put the stat out there. The Lions are actually one of the stickiest teams in coverage. Average separation is a league low in average separation. I think it's like 3.2 or something, which is wild. And they're getting beat on some really good throws. But there hasn't been a guy like Kirby Joseph in the back. The players that are on the field, the cornerbacks that are on the field with the sticky coverage, they're not making the plays to get the interceptions. And that's kind of like where I stand right now. They're sticky in coverage. It shows up on the All-22. It shows up on the statistics. But the reality of the situation is this. It shows up everywhere, but when you need to make a play, you aren't making the play. And that's been the whole issue the whole season. Whether it's been Hutchinson missing a sack, whether it's been Amik Robertson missing an interception that leads to a touchdown, whether it's name a player on the defensive side who has made a mistake and it's went right back in their face. And you usually don't see that this much, but for Detroit, it seemed like every week there's something where they're making a play and they're missing a tackle and it's ending up 7 the other way. So it is what it is. Steven says there were some missed calls. There were some missed calls, but even if they got the calls, the Rams were just too much. I agree. The calls are the calls, okay? But you having 5 yards in the third quarter, that's what lost you the game. You could say everything you want to say about the calls or whatever the case may be. You had 5 freaking yards in the third quarter. You don't deserve to win. You just don't deserve to win. And unfortunately for Detroit, their offense has to play perfect to win games. It's not that the defense will bail them out, because the defense isn't capable of bailing them out, especially with the Brian Branch injury. Oren says, and not being able to get Gibbs moving was detrimental. Yeah, but I think that if they would have, thought about it and looked at the statistics and said, okay, Monty's having a great game. Let's put him. Let's go with him. Let's ride the hot hand. They went too much with Gibbs. They forced the ball in Gibbs' hands. They really needed a bulldozer today. They didn't need Jahmyr Gibbs, who's speedy. The Rams are really fluffing that out. I think if you would have had Monty, you would have just taken him and just wear them down, man. Wear them down. David says, we had a 3rd down and 11. They ran a draw play. You don't give your team a chance to win doing that. You're now throwing the ball around the Titans' other receivers. They need to spread the ball more. They don't use their rookie receiver enough. Well, I understand why they ran the 3rd down and 11. They ran a draw play. They were just trying to protect the field goal. That's what they were trying to do. They were just trying to protect the field goal. Now, Isaac Tesla not having another game where he wasn't really something on the scoreboard. We'll go to it. Detroit receiving, he had one target. And I think it takes 2 to tango. I think Jared Goff really needs to look for Isaac Tesla, but Tesla needs to get better at run blocking. That's his major deficiency, and that's why he's not on the field a majority of the time. His run blocking sucks. That's what it comes down to. What are the odds lines went out to make the playoff? Brand new. So their schedule lays out like this: they play the Steelers, they play the Vikings, and they play the Bears. I give them a good chance to beat the Steelers and the Vikings. Bears will be a tough one because it's on the road in Chicago, and we don't know what the elements will be. So I think out of 2 of the 3 should be gimmies if you're a playoff team. And if you're a playoff team, you win those games. The Chicago game is going to be the one that's 50-50. So I see that they're I don't know the statistics right now on what the playoff chances could be, but I know coming into this game, before the Packers game, all that, 40%. So we'll see what they do. Running Gibbs on third after already getting no gain on Gibbs was a terrible call. We did that other game, same result. It's exactly what I'm saying, man. Sometimes you need to take a look in the mirror or take a look on a stat sheet and you can see exactly where you're going to go with the ball. When I look at the stat sheet and I see Dave Montgomery, 32 yards, 7 carries, and Jahmyr Gibbs, 38 yards, 13 carries, it leads me to believe that if they would have done a good job at just recognizing the game, and this is something I've had issue with since Campbell's taken over the play calling, is the in-game management of knowing when to hit this button and when to hit this button and when to hit this button. Seems like we're losing it a little bit. Thank you, Johnny Morton. Because I think last year, Dan Campbell would have been like, no, Monty's having a great game. Let's leave him in. Gibbs is having a great game this game. Leave him in. I think that would be great. But you look at the statistics of these two teams coming into this game, and you see how good their rushing defense was. I mean, these were 2 of the best rushing defenses in the entire NFL. And unfortunately for Detroit, they couldn't really do the little things correct. That's what it comes down to. More comments. Heart of Lions fans, Dan Clown show Campbell not run demo in second half cost us the game. You know what? Look, I agree with you. I think that, but again, I go back to the whole thing I just was talking about, heart of a Lion fan. When you think about it, Dan Campbell last year, when he had no playing calling, he was doing what he was doing. It felt like he took over the play calling, and some in-game management skills have eroded because he has too much on his plate. I would really put this on like someone in the booth to tell me, look, Gibbs is having a rough game. Let's get Demo in there. Let's hammer the nail. Let's put Demo in there just to wreck their freaking minds, man. But again, goes back to what I said. All you have to do is take a look at the stat sheet right away. 2.9 to 4.6. It should have been easy where I was going to go if I was calling the plays. Running Gibbs up the gut is a loser 8 out of 8 times. He's a slasher, not a bull rusher. Campbell is just dense. Again, goes back to exactly what I was saying. I've said it multiple times. Everyone has said the same thing. It seems like ever since Campbell took over play calling, his game management skills of what buttons to push has really eroded. And that's what happened. Because if you look at the stat sheet, just look at the stat sheet. 2.9 for Gibbs, 4.6 for Monty. You would think that if you saw that, you would think if Dan Campbell saw that, he would just say, all right, we're gonna change it up a little bit. Let's hammer Dave Montgomery. Let's do what we need to do. BJ makes another great point. He says full-time officials make refs answer media questions after the game and do what the ACC did. Let's hear the review process. Actually, you know what? I thought it was interesting because Jim Miller and Pat Kerwin, moving the chains, NFL Sirius XM radio, they said the same exact thing. And they're for NFL property. The thing about them is they could say what they want to say because The NFL's not firing them. They're one of the best shows on Sirius XM. So I hope that the NFL seriously listens to them and just gets their input because they got really good opinions on refs. Very good opinions. And what you just said, BJ, is everything that they've mentioned. They've even mentioned the eye in the sky so that no calls get missed. And then they mentioned Jim Miller and Pat Kerwin also mentioned that if you miss a call or you're so bad at doing calls, like you miss a certain amount of calls, you get benched. You get put in the booth for the next game. That's what they said. So I would love to see that. Larger rosters mean more revenue is given to teams for salaries. With the way they've handled exclusive stream broadcasts, I assume they don't look at the bottom of the bottom of the line. Well, they better start looking at the bottom line. They better start looking at the bottom line because the bottom line is the bottom line for this team is in the NFL is you're seeing injuries all over the place from the Green Bay Packers, the Detroit Lions, Cleveland Browns, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, everywhere. And I hear other podcasters talk about it ad nauseum that they just don't have a good enough players to keep the roster put. You see what LA doesn't have. They have very few injuries, but they're motoring along. Seahawks, very healthy bunch. They're motoring along. I think the Colts would love an expanded roster to have another quarterback since they lost Jones and Richardson, and now they went to 44-year-old Phillip Rivers, who threw a touchdown day, and they almost beat the Seahawks. So pretty crazy for me. Dante says, next year we draft O-line heavy, cornerback depth, and more experience. I think next year it'll come all together. Need to stay healthy though. How do we have the most players on our back-to-back years? It's really maddening to me, Dante. It really. You think about last year and you say, it can't get worse than this. It really can't get worse than this. And then it does. And you're like, huh. It's kind of like, you have a girlfriend or you have a wife or a fiance or whatever. And you're like, it can't happen again. Like, it can't happen again. Like, your girlfriend goes out and whatever and does, and she cheats on you. You're like, it can't happen again. And then it just happens again. You're like, the hell happened here, man? It's honestly, I have no reason to figure this out, but I have no reason why this has happened year after year after year. It just don't make sense to me. All right. Is there anything more saying? This is from Al Carson. He says the Lions' run defense allowed 69% offensive rushing success rate against the Rams, the single worst mark that Detroit has surrendered in all 86 games of the Detroit Dan Campbell era, and the worst by the franchise since 2003. Despite the significant resources the Lions have invested in their defensive front and stopping the run, Los Angeles still produced its sixth most efficient rushing performance across 159 games under Sean McVay. That's rough. I didn't think it was that bad, but Al put it up there, and I'll put it up for you guys to read. This really shows you exactly what it's about. It's almost like you can't get worse than that. You really can't get worse than that. Oh man, it sucks. That really sucks, man. One of the worst rushing success rates ever. And then you go down. Al says the greatest thing, worse than Matt Patricia or Rod Marinelli different defense. There is no to be fair. Because he's right. He's right. Sucks. But that needs to be cleaned up for sure. Let's go back and let's see what we have here. Oh geez. Yeah, it's just that is what it is. Let's get to some more comments. We have three more comments we'll get to, and then we'll end the podcast. So thanks for everyone for listening. Ken Fisher says, bottom line, Detroit, our defense coordinator, he may know his linebackers being a linebacker coach, but he knows nothing about defense. Why do you allow one man to beat you throughout the game? And we never once in 3 weeks have had sent our corners on a blitz. Our defense coordinator is nothing but more than a cheerleader who can't make adjustments. Here is what I will say, Ken, and I love you, Ken. But here's the issue. This team is so depleted defensively. Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph, gone. You can't really exhaust resources and saying, let's go blitz the cornerback. Because who are you going to leave in coverage? Safeties like Avante Maddox, Thomas, and Daniel Thomas. Not the best idea. Right now, they're having to play this kind of soft defense to try to keep it afloat. But it seems like it's going the way that it did last year, where you have every piece that's going is just going in the right direction, right? And you have every piece that's going in the right direction, and you just can't make the right place. And that's not an onus on him. It's not an onus on anybody else. But it is what it is. And Ken just sent a message back and said, then continue to double guy that beats you. Puka Nacua is a beast. That's just what it comes down to. And I don't think that there's anybody, I don't care if you could double him. I think he could beat a lot of your double teams. And I think that's the problem you have right now. Like, DJ Reed hasn't seemed the same since he came back from injury. Meek Robertson's having a terrible year. I really don't know who you're going to put on him to double him. Like, the reality of the situation is the Lions they're deficient in talent in the back end right now. And them having one of the worst rushing defense games in their whole history since 2003 is unbelievable. This show is exactly what's happening. So hopefully this isn't a sign of things to come. We'll definitely know more in the next couple weeks. James says, I really want to see how Wright would have done in this game. It's sad that he got injured so damn quickly after being activated. Wright seemed to be been a pretty solid backup. Yeah, Brock is he would have been a really good tight end, but now you're down to your third string tight end, your fourth string tight end, your fifth string tight end. Like, they get nothing from the tight end position. And if I look at the statistics today, no tight end was targeted at all. So that tells you everything you need to know about that. Oren says, on a positive note, maybe we have an easier strength of schedule. Bright side. We could be like the 49ers, where we have the easiest schedule on planet Earth. And that's great. Just win your games. Because the 49ers schedule is honestly, there's not a schedule that's easier than the San Francisco 49ers. BJ, teams have had a huge success rushing inside the edge rushes. So either they're forced to collapse the run lane or rush the passer. They can't do both well. I agree with that, BJ. What a great comment that is, because you heard earlier in the week that, Al-Qadim Muhammad says we're going to start rushing the passer more. Jack Campbell says he gets him the run fits. Well, they had their worst game defending the run. So it just goes hand in hand. Like, if you prioritize the run, you're not going to get as many sacks. And if you don't prioritize the run, you're going to get a big run. So it's kind of like a catch-22. And I think today against the LA Rams, I think you would have prioritized their run game, because they are the team that uses the play action the most, and that's what gives them the most success. And they allowed the Rams to get run rampant on them. Sucks. Ken Fisher says Parsons for the Packers tore his ACL, and that's a big injury. Huge injury for the whole NFC, especially for the NFC North. And as we look at the playoff picture right now, when you look at the playoff picture, which I'll put up here, here is the NFC. Detroit's right on the outside right now. So it's I'll put it up right now. Let me put it up. Right there. You see Detroit's 8th. They're still ahead of the Panthers, which they should be. But you look at the teams in front of them. I mean, some teams need to lose 2 games. The Bears need to lose 1 game. You have a game against them, so that'd be great. But it sucks. The NFC South. The team is going to have a team that gets in. Even the Eagles at 9-5 would be great, but they're going to win their division potentially. But you got the Seahawks, 49ers, and Packers all in there, and they got. It's going to be tough to catch the Packers. It's going to be tough to catch the Niners and the Seahawks. So that's what sucks about that. All right, let's. Mike says too many weapons. The Rams. Who do you double? Leaves some great player wide open. Exactly. You can't really double most of them because it will leave someone wide open, and that is the problem with them. And you look at how they've been doing this year, the Rams, and the big injury of Devontae Adams is really going to come back to haunt them. And I don't know who's going to win the NFC now because I was steadfast on the Rams winning the NFC because I just don't believe in the Bears. I don't believe in the Eagles. I don't believe in the Buccaneers. I think the Seahawks are smoke and mirrors too. I don't believe in the 49ers without Fred Warner. I don't believe in the Green Bay Packers without Micah Parsons. So who is going to win a wide open NFC? Who knows? Who knows? I personally think we did our best we could on defense. The early pick was pivotal. We needed another. And yeah, Amik Robertson had a pick, missed it. A couple plays later, they get in the end zone. You really need to take advantage of those chances when you get them. Exactly, Mike Fisher. Ken Fisher. Lions win the last 3. They should be in as a wild card, but unfortunately, they may have to travel to play the Rams or Seattle. They'll probably have to play the Rams or Seattle the way it's shaping up. So, I mean, just get in. You never know what can happen. That's the way I look at it. Just get in the dance and you never know what can happen. Last comment, Mike Fisher, Packers win all in and Parsons for the next 2 years, first rounders. And it came back to haunt them. Tisk, tisk. It's an amazing thing when you put in all your chips in a bucket and it doesn't come back. This is probably one of the reasons that a lot of people were all in for let's go get Trey Hendrickson, right? Well, this is the minus side of it. If he gets an injury like Trey Hendrickson had, or you get an injury like Micah Parsons has, now those picks that you gave up for nothing, because you're not going to win a Super Bowl like that. Mike Fisher says, we are not related. Look, it's funny because you guys are coming up back to back. It's kind of funny. So, yeah, I didn't know if you guys were, but it's as Ken Fisher, Mike Fisher. I was like, damn, this is great. Back and forth, the fish. Lions get in, they could be dangerous for opponents. I think they can too. Let's end it like this. I think if the Lions get in, they'll be dangerous. No doubt about it. They're going to have to play perfect football to win those games. But they need, along the line, you need to find a defensive identity. Without Bryant, without Joseph, who's going to step up in the secondary? And then, the loss of Laporta, who's going to step up for Laporta? Is it going to be Tesla? Is it going to be this guy? Who could it be? That remains to be seen. But today was a game where you were so close again, and you just couldn't hit the next step. So that's what sucks. Can't believe Jake Bates missed. I feel like he should be getting better. That questionable at this point of the season. He's good. I think it was just a bad miss. Not every team can have Brandon Aubrey as their kicker. Me and James talked about that last podcast. James says, do we have any big players that may come back somewhat soon, or is this our 53-man current for the rest of the season? Could have Kirby back. Could. But this looks like it's going to be your 53-man roster. Sam Laporta, I don't think is going to come back. Brian Branch, absolutely not. So maybe you get Mahogany back. Maybe. Manu isn't really something I'm. Yoshika could be back. But again, missing those two players, Laporta and Branch, those are huge misses. So no matter how you slice it, just a tough thing to go about. All right, this is the end of the podcast. Thank you guys for watching. As always, you can go to the Detroit Lions News podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you missed any of this, you can go to YouTube, Detroit Lions News podcast on YouTube. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one to talk more Detroit Lions football here on the Detroit Lions News podcast. I'm your host, Joe Chapman. We will see you on the next podcast as we talk more Detroit Lions football and the Pittsburgh Steelers coming into town. Thank you. Have a good night.